Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Is Patrice Motsepe running for the president of the ANC? Could he be the next president of South Africa? Would that actually be great for South Africa, or would that be the biggest mistake ever made? Does South Africa actually need another billionaire president, another World Economic Forum champion? Let's dissect it. Let's cut straight to it. Do you ever get the feeling that something big is happening, but nobody wants to say it out loud? Like when all the signs are pointing to a shift, a pivot in the story, but the characters are pretending like it's business as usual. But you know, the viewer, you can tell. You've watched Sinners. You know that those guys are vampires. You want to tell the people in that juke joint, that watch out, something's about to happen. But the movie has to play out. The story has to play out. It feels like that's what's happening right now in South Africa. There's a silence, a continuity of business as usual, but there's a name at the center of the silence, and that name is Patrice Motsepe. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been noticing, the silence is not quite silence anymore. It's turning into whispers, and those whispers are growing into murmurs across the media and social media. Certain things are beginning to happen that give a suggestion that the man is making a move or preparing to make a move. Let me ask you a question. A quick question. What's the biggest problem a billionaire has when he wants to run for political office? What's the biggest problem a billionaire has when he wants to run for political office? The answer is the fact that we're all going to be minding his business and finding out too much about how he's making money, who he's making money with, and finding out that we don't particularly like that business or those business partners. Last week, something happened which convinced me that Patrice Motsepe is actually preparing a political run for ANC leadership, and that these murmurs, these whispers are a real thing and something is in motion. What happened? Patrice Motsepe is taking his vast business empire private. Last week, African Rainbow Capital Investment shareholders voted to approve the company's delisting from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and the A2X. And these are the two stock exchanges in Johannesburg. Taking his business private could potentially help Patrice Motsepe conceal or reduce public scrutiny of his partners, his interests, and his financial arrangements, especially if he has a motive to pursue a political career, such as running for ANC president or ultimately president of South Africa. You don't want the public in your business like that. You don't want that to become part of the campaign against you. You don't want particular relationships to be scrutinized across time, because one of the biggest criticisms that does exist in the political conversation among young South Africans is the economic pacts which were made by political and business elites in CODESA. And you may not want people to be looking at that and making that part of your business. So the way that you can make all of that go away, go private, put a lot of your stuff under a trust, let your son run those affairs, let your family run those business matters, then you go and pursue the political side of the equation. But because everything is in a trust, there's no shareholders meetings, there's no public annual reports that can be scrutinized, analyzed, there's no CIPC data around who's who in your zoo. All we can get is information from the websites, and that information doesn't have to disclose as much. So taking things private at this particular point does actually help Patrice in a big way. So not only did that happen, which in and of itself is a big clue, but over the last few days, I've been noticing some stories in the media about his candidacy, potential candidacy, and his availability for the 2027 ANC elective conference. Just take a look at these headlines and tell me if you don't see a pattern and a build-up. 1st of May, News 24. 4th of May, Rapport. 4th of May, Daily Investor. 7th of May, African Report. Don't you see it? There's a poster, everything. This to me looks like what Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman were talking about in the book Manufacturing Consent. The public is being nudged into this idea. So how basically manufacturing consent and nudging happens, you suggest something long enough, you get voices talking about it while simultaneously attacking the other options, then the audience that follows those platforms has to buy in to the idea. They're nudged into it. They believe it's their idea, that they want this thing, that this thing works for them. And if you look, News 24 did a story 1st of May. Rapport does another story 4th of May. Think about that. News 24 owns Rapport. So anything coming out of Rapport is from them as well. Is it Rapports? Rapport. I think it's Rapport is French, right? Rapport would be Afrikaans. I don't speak Afrikaans, so excuse me if I'm butchering the Afrikaans side of it. So effectively, they had 2 articles on the same story in the same week for the English-speaking audience and the Afrikaans-speaking audience. Both of these entities are owned by Naspers, which has played a major role in South African political outcomes since its founding in 1915. Naspers, it's a political player in South Africa. This has been happening in the news media and has also been discussed by YouTube platforms such as Biz News, which is anti-ANC but pro-DA. So what this tells me is that if Biz News is talking about a Motsepe candidacy for the ANC, that business is supportive of this particular move. What are all of these articles actually saying? What is being discussed in these articles? Well, the multiple reports have generally given a positive slant to his candidacy, potential candidacy. They're saying he can potentially save the ANC. The reports are saying that party insiders, movers and shakers in the African National Congress have approached Patrice Motsepe to run for party president at its December 2027 conference. And he's said that he's available, he's interested. That's what they're saying. They're saying that a slate has been proposed or formed, which includes the names of Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who's based in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane. A mock-up poster is being circulated, and they've been mentioned as Motsepe's potential running mates in the positions of Deputy President and Party Secretary General, respectively. The challenge with those names is that, firstly, the ANC in KZN is in shambles. And secondly, the man, Oscar Mabuyane, is not viewed as being an ethical and or a competent leader. People say that service delivery is atrocious in the Eastern Cape and that corruption is at an all-time high in the Eastern Cape. So many examples. I think one example that I can think of is the Enoch Mgijima Stadium, which was said to have cost 23 million, but it looked like it was built for significantly less than that. You know, all of the politicians during the local government elections went there, local government elections in 2021, and they were showing that particular stadium as an example of the extensive corruption in the Eastern Cape. But anybody from the Eastern Cape can tell you that things are not looking good. Rural Eastern Cape has not seen development. Money is being allocated for various programs in the Eastern Cape. It just doesn't end up where it's supposed to be. And you know where it ends up. You know where that money ends up. In the Hosh Kari Maimas, Nkari Uli Chinas, the yellow thighs of the slave queens from Konga. You know where the money goes. You know where the money goes. I don't have to tell. Guys, I'm not attacking those who are of an attractive genetic disposition. Bless you. God blessed you. But when the blessings are coming from public coffers, then we have to cough and say, aibo. So if Patrice is coming to deliver the Sundowns era to the ANC, will he be able to do that with the compromised individuals who have been mentioned in his top leadership? Will he be able to win if they cannot get KZN? Because as you know, there's a Kwazam Konto happening on that side. Kwazam Konto is happening on that side of the equation. So let's go over his bio quickly for those who may not fully know his story and or his connections. By the way, a lot of the material that I'm using is coming from this book, Patrice Motsepe by Janet Smith. This is an unauthorized biography. She did a short interview with him towards the end. I'm going to do a full book dissection on this in the book lab. The other book that I'm using is the ANC Billionaires by Peter Dutoy, and that also is going to be looked at in the book lab. The book lab is the members only section of the dissection of MJTV. You can join the book lab on the YouTube channel. If you're using an iPhone, you have to log on to your Safari browser. You log on to YouTube on your Safari browser and then join that way. So we look at interesting books. We do analytical reading, synoptic reading to make sure that we can really get the gist, bring out the bone marrow from the actual books and see how we can then use that knowledge to better understand what's happening in South Africa, in Africa, and the world. So a lot of the content is coming from this book as well as other research. So let's go quickly into his bio. Patrice Motsepe is named after Patrice Lumumba. Did you know that? He was born, I think, 1 year after Lumumba was assassinated. He was born in 1962 in Soweto, currently aged 65. Patrice Motsepe is the 10th richest man in Africa and the richest black man in South Africa. In the South African wealth list, he's actually fourth. First is Johan Rupert and family. Second is Nicky Oppenheimer and family. Third is Koos Becker. And fourth is Patrice. Patrice is the founder and chairman of African Rainbow Minerals, and he actually became a billionaire in 2008. He completed his law degree at the University of the Witwatersrand, I think in 1987. 1988, he joined the prestigious Johannesburg law firm Bowman Gilfillan, and in 1993, he became the first black partner at the firm Bowman. Bowman is one of the, they're up there. It's one of the big four law firms, and they're very strict on who they take. You need to be cream of the crop. So he came from Wits. He was cream of the crop at Wits. Then he became the first black partner at Bowman. In 1994, he started a mining services contracting business called Future Mining. While he was a partner at Bowman, he was actually doing mining law, and it gave him a lot of insights into the mining sector. 1997, he formed African Rainbow Minerals, and he got 7 mine shafts from Anglo Gold, the mining company which is owned by the Oppenheimers. There were some mine shafts which are considered by the CEO at the time, Bobby Godsell, to not be great mine shafts, to be failing mine shafts. Gold price was not doing that well at the time, so they were like, give Patrice these particular mines. And we know from the Zama Zama stories, contemporary Zama Zama stories, that if a large mining operation is not necessarily able to make profits from a mine, it doesn't mean that the mine doesn't have gold. There's gold in them hills, as they say. And Patrice knew. He was the original Zama Zama, if you think about it. If you think about it, right? So he went there, he Zama Zama'd, and he was successful, right? Because that then became the vehicle for his wealth. But it must be said, they were not just giving out these shafts, etc., out of charity. Big business, and it's discussed in this particular book, big business understood that they had to start doing deals with the ANC in order for them to continue enjoying their control of the South African economy. And the big company that was involved in negotiations, the people who even went to Lusaka in 1985 to meet with Tambo Mbeki and others, were actually from Anglo Gold. So they were always interested in orchestrating the transition from the National Party to the ANC. So Patrice getting these mine shafts was part of that strategy to include some of the black elites in the economic elite, so to speak. So he got those mine shafts. He was able to pay back because it was a owner finance. So the owner gave him that stuff, and then he had to pay back, the owner being Anglo Gold. He paid back. He was profitable, and he then, became his own man in that particular respect. Interesting thing to mention that you need to be aware of. In 1997, he formed African Rainbow Minerals. In 1998, Cyril Ramaphosa led the BEE Commission, and that commission finalized its report in 2000. Various sector charters were developed. These sectoral charters made partial black ownership of South African companies mandatory. They set quotas, and the Financial Services Charter was going into effect in 2004. So I've just taken you through that BEE side, right? In 2003, Patrice, knowing all of this, formed Ubuntu Butu Investments, which then became a BEE partner to Sanlam in 2003, just before the charter came into effect. So he came in, got shares, he made his deal work, paid back his debt, so to speak, And then Sanlam actually became very profitable under his co-ownership, and he's actually one of the biggest shareholders now in Sanlam and is chairman of Sanlam. So that's another deal that benefited him. But what's interesting to mention in his economic elevation is the positioning of his relatives who were heavily involved in politics and occupied government positions or occupied positions where laws could be changed. Just think about this. Jeff Radebe was Minister of Public Enterprises between 1999 and 2004. 97, he forms ARM. Jeff Radebe is Minister of Public Enterprises. Cyril Ramaphosa is leading the BE Commission. The commission comes up with charters. Cyril Ramaphosa, and Jeff Radebe are brothers-in-law to Patrice Motsepe. So you can see why the Smali Republic issue comes in, right? It's brothers in law, brothers in finance, brothers in billionaire things, right? And Jeff Radebe has been one of the longest serving ministers, serving under every president, right? And I think the last time he was minister, probably 2019, but he served under every president from 1994 up until 2019. Even wanted to run for president at some point, but he's still very involved in ANC activities. So I hope you can see what the implications are in that side of the equation. In 2016, he launched a private equity firm, African Rainbow Capital. So that deals with his business interests, and African Rainbow Capital is involved in a lot of stuff, right? Let's talk about the soccer. In 2003, he got a 51% stake in Sundowns Football Club, right? 2004, he bought the rest of it because he was getting money all over the place, left, right, and center. He became the owner and president of the Mamelodi Sundowns Football Club. They just won the Premier Soccer League, the Betway Premier Soccer League again, right? This is like their 8th time in a row or something to that effect. They've been dominating this league even more than PSG dominates in France, even more than Liverpool, even more than Real Madrid and whoever is the dominant player, the dominant team in Spain. The South African Premier Soccer League is now the property of Sundowns. Mamelodi Sundowns wanna own that thing. You might as well call it the Betway Sundowns Premier League Championship. Give them the championship and then see who's going to be number 2, because they're going to be number 1. No question, they're going to be number 1, right? So that's just something that we have to keep in mind as well, right? In terms of thinking about the dynamics, right? So we've spoken about that element. Interesting to point out, in 2019, he bought a 37% share in the Blue Bulls company, right? Not Blue Balls, Blue Bulls company, which controls the Pretoria-based rugby team. The other largest shareholder in the Blue Bulls company is Johan Rupert. This suggests to me that there's a very healthy relationship between the two billionaires, and that has a bearing when it comes to South African politics. Rupert is linked with Given Makari. He did that interview. Where did Mbuyiseni Ndlozi go? He went to Power FM. I don't know if you see what hey, do you see the C's? Are you seeing? Are you connecting the dots like the man said? Something that's also worth mentioning, around 2006, he formed African Rainbow Energy and Power, which would later become a major player in the independent power producer energy sector after the government changed regulations to allow for private players to enter the space. That too tracks back to Ramaphosa, it tracks back to Radebe, it tracks back to a lot of the things that were done to make sure that IPPs can become players in this network through that legislation, which was known as the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. REIPPP. You down with IPP? Yeah, you know me. You down with IPP? That's a song from Naughty by Nature. If you don't know, now you know. So that's all of that. In 2021, Motsepe was elected president of the Confederation of African Football, which is the sports governing body on the continent. He has recently been re-elected. Both times he was elected unopposed, by the way. He moved behind the scenes, made sure that there's no competition, no contestation. Billionaire cannot be competing. That is not billionaire-like. So some people are excited at the prospect of him becoming president of South Africa because they view him as being a competent businessman and moreover, a fierce competitor who wants to win and to be the best. And justifiably, he has shown that he's a top performer. His BE deals are different from the other BE deals that everybody. He did BE the way that BE was meant to be done, where the man came in, got stakes, paid off what he owed, grew those stakes to a large state position, and then became number 4 richest man in South Africa. That's not how the other people did it. There's a lot of people who benefited from BE, but they're not big billionaires in US dollar terms like Patrice. So he's shown that he's competitive. He can buy you, buy your league, buy you out. Right? I don't know if you can buy me out, but like, hey, maybe if you if you ever see me, there's this. Sometimes you'll see media personalities, commentators, whatever, they become spokesperson. And then they show up like supporting the thing that they were criticizing harshly. And then you just see them there now, they're arguing with journalists. And then you know that, hey, the bag was good. The bag was solid. Anyway, Patrice he will make you an offer. You ask anyone who's a player in the Premier League, they'll tell you. So he's competitive. He's somebody who likes excellence. He's willing to shift players around, shift coaches, and he will fire a coach if he feels like coaches are not delivering. If you read this book right here, you'll see how many coaches that he rotated them. He got them out of there if they were not performing. So some people view him as a competent businessman, fierce competitor who wants to win, be the best. He wanted Sundowns to win, be the best in Africa. He's still chasing that dream. Look at how he has made that team the best in South Africa. And because most of the national team comes from Sundowns, the South African soccer team itself has been performing excellently on the continental stage because of the high salaries that are now, they've been high salaries before, but the level of excellence has also now created more youth interest and young players are playing at a higher level. The South African under-20 team, Bafana, what do they call them? Amajita. They are performing excellently for a long time. Bafana was not performing in a way that people thought a South African soccer team should be performing. But in the last 3-4 years, I think everyone is smiling ear to ear, right? It's back to the Shibobo days. Do you remember TKZ and Benny? Benny's in the 18 area and Bafana in the area. TKZ in the area. So that was the era of great soccer, great South African soccer on the continental stage. It created beautiful moments. And now we are back at that particular point. And maybe he's learning from Rupert as well, because Rupert has used his influence within the rugby world to keep, his connection with the community and spread narratives about stronger together, etc., etc. All of that stuff is not just by accident, by the way. So let's talk about potential challenges. I think you see what I'm putting down here. Let's talk about potential challenges. The first challenge that he has is that he may actually not be an active member of the ANC. The ANC's constitution states that only those who have been an active member in good standing of the ANC for at least 10 years can be nominated for election to the National Executive Council, the NEC. And this would apply to the presidential position too. As things stand, it's not clear whether Patrice Motsepe has held 10 years of unbroken membership in the party, although I think he has. He's just too meticulous to not have done so. He hasn't necessarily been active in the party except for his attendance of events like gala dinners, but he's always been active in paying the deposits into the party. If you look at how many gold, you look at directly he has been contributing to the ANC. In fact, even in 2012, he was contributing to the ANC. At some point, he had made massive contributions to the point where at the gala dinner, he was sitting right next to Ramaphosa. He donated to to Jacob Zuma. He donated to the Jacob Zuma Foundation at some point, 10 million rands. So he's been making contributions to the ANC regardless of who the leader was of the ANC. And in fact, those donations that he was making in 2012 may have potentially helped President Ramaphosa become the deputy president. Because remember what Zuma said. He said, they brought this guy to me. I don't want this guy particularly. They brought him to me. And I was like, all right, let's go. So as things stand, it's not clear whether he's been fully. He has been consistently attending gala dinners. He's been a blesser to the party. But branch activity is what matters to some members of the ANC. And being in good standing is not a joke in the ANC. Like, the first thing that you have to say in the ANC to show your paperwork. Because when you get in there, they're like, Bani wena, papers! Papers! Then you have to say, I am a member in good standing of the branch since 1997. And if you can't show that you're a member in good standing, you can't speak in the meeting. You'll be out of order fast. They don't play with that. So, interestingly, the person who will ultimately have to make a ruling on this is the Secretary General of the party, Fikile Mbalula, who is someone who is opposed to the Panyaza Lesufi and the Paul Mashatile faction, and he may even be willing to end up on a slate with Motsepe, So the thing is, Mbalula has presidential ambitions and aspirations, but he's also a very practical guy who can change his political affiliations based on how he sees the wind blowing. He used to be in the Zuma camp, but when he saw that the room was going in a different direction, he went in a different direction. So that's one challenge that he's facing. The second challenge is that there are concerns about the Spali Republic, the Ramaphosa and Motsepe dynasty. Patrice Motsepe right now is the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa's brother-in-law. His sister, Tshepo Motsepe, is married to the president. This family arrangement and connection does lead to Patrice being seen as a candidate who is continuing the Ramaphosa faction, a third term for Ramaphosa, Ramaphosa endorsement, all of these things. It's the same criticism that existed with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma when she made a play for this. And interestingly, she also went to be chairperson of the African Union, came back, etc., etc. So there are criticisms which could arise, for this chairperson of CAF coming back and trying to actually be the president of the ANC. There are similarities because of the family connections, right? So him being positioned as a continuity figure for the president legacy and the family's wealth accumulation in South Africa could lead to pushback. The other brother, as I've said, the other brother-in-law, Jeff Radebe, has also been in critical various positions which have helped Patrice Motsepe. He was Minister of Energy, for instance, when IPPs got more funding from Eskom. Let me explain. In mid-2016, the state-owned electricity producer Eskom indicated that it was not willing to sign new power purchase agreements for renewable projects. This is where a lot of the drama about Brian Molefe, all of this stuff comes into play. They said, we're not going to pay for this stuff. It's not making sense. It's not financially viable. We're not paying any more we're not signing any more power purchase agreements, PPAs, for renewable projects. When Jeff Radebe came into power as minister of that portfolio in 2018, after the removal of Zuma, Eskom shifted that position. And that then led to new purchase power agreements being signed. These agreements are for 20 years each. And then in the next bid window, for the bid window for these IPPs, Patrice Motsepe and his consortium called Ikamva Consortium, which includes companies from the UK and Norway, they won half of the IPP contracts that were on bid. So they were able to sign purchase power agreements. Can you see that? So at that time, Jeff was Minister of, I'll tell you now, he was Minister of Energy between 2018 and 2019. In that short space of time, he was able to, before the reshuffle, he was able to get the Eskom to make commitments to signing new purchase power agreements. I mean, that's something that is relevant in the context of the relationship between Patrice Motsepe, Jeff Radebe, and even Cyril Ramaphosa. Jeff is someone who is deployed right now to be the ANC convener of KZN after the Provincial Executive Committee was dissolved earlier this year. So he's married to Bridget, and Bridget Radebe is the older sister of Patrice Motsepe. She's the founder of Mamaku Mining, which is, according to Forbes, it's something that made her one of the richest women in Africa and is an immensely successful mining firm with assets in platinum, gold, uranium, coal, chrome exploration, mining interests. She's also served as the president of the South African Mining Development Association. She has mining interests in the DRC, all over the place. Taken together, there's a concern about these political relationships through marriage and the wealth accumulation of this dynasty. The dynasty of the Radebes, the dynasty of the Motsepes, the dynasty of the Ramaphosas, because it's a triangle like this. It's a triangle. It's a African Illuminati, if you will, of money. Sidla Nati or Sidla Soto. I don't know which one it is. So, is the candidacy a likely outcome? Is the candidacy a likely outcome? Is a Motsepe run for office likely? There's some dynamics within the ANC and within the business elite class that would really make this option attractive. And for that reason, I think it's a viable one. In my view, and perhaps you would agree with my view on this, there are 4 large institutions that need to back you to win power and to govern in South Africa. Right? 4. Or if I put it differently, there are some key institutions that have large numbers of people and resources which can help you to get to a position of power and influence in South Africa. What are those institutions? Where are the numbers? Politics is a numbers game. You need numbers in China. Where are the numbers? Number 1, the soccer fans. You need the soccer fans and you need the rugby fans. So he ticks the boxes on the sports fans. Number 2, the church. Number 3, big business. Number 4, students, particularly the universities. There's number 5, which is the media. But you don't necessarily need the media. They will come if you've got the other 4, right? But I think they also have the media in any case. Patrice arguably has 3 of the 4 main pillars when it comes to the soccer fans. And there should be no doubt right now about the size of the soccer community and the followership of the soccer space in South Africa after the Nedbank Cup final. As soon as Bafana started getting back to winning ways, you can really get a feel. Many people were just depressed and disappointed and despondent about the state of South African soccer. So they stopped, being as zealous. But soccer is the biggest sport in South Africa. It's the biggest, bigger than rugby. Rugby is a small boy. Rugby, what is rugby? Rugby is like, what can I compare it to soccer? Rugby is like the salad. It's like a salad on a Sunday dinner. So there's going to be a lot of starch, a lot of meat. There's going to be a salad on that plate, but rugby is the salad. It ain't the main. It's not the chuck steak in an African meal. There will be salad. Probably chakalaka, or it's coleslaw, or what are those beans that they put there, the bean salad that they make. But yes, there's, rugby gets a lot of attention because of the 2 World Cups, etc., etc. You think it's the biggest sport in South Africa. It's not. It's not the biggest sport. The biggest sport is soccer. But even if it was rugby, Patrice Motsepe owns 37% of the Blue Bulls company. Think about that. So he's got arguably 3 of the pillars. He's got sports, soccer. He owns the most successful team in the Premier Soccer League. They are dominating the competition. They have a large following. Not only does he own the team that owns the other teams and trophies, but he's been able to elevate his status in global and African soccer by being chairperson of the Confederation of African Football twice. When it comes to the church, there are 2 relevant factors to consider. Number 1, the relationship between Patrice Motsepe and the ZCC. Patrice Motsepe has a partnership with the Zion Christian Church. This partnership involves his bank, Time Bank, and the ZCC, offering banking products and services to church members. The ZCC is the largest church in South Africa by numbers, with an estimated 12 million members. So that's number 1. Last year, 70,000 believers from different churches gathered at the FNB Stadium in Nasrec, Johannesburg. For what? The Motsepe Foundation National Day of Prayer. And this wasn't the first one. It was the 4th such National Day of Prayer. In attendance were some of the following churches: the Zion Christian Church, St. John's Apostolic Faith Mission, Shembe Nazareth Baptist Church, United Apostolic Church, Salvation Army, United Apostolic Faith Church, St. John's Apostolic Church of Prophecy, the Presbyterian Christian Apostolic Faith, the IPCC, the Independent Pentecostal Churches of Christ, the African Methodist Church. All of these were in attendance. These are large and well-organized uniform churches. They wear the colors. The women of the churches wear the various colors. When they were in the stadium, you're just looking at it, looked like a 7 salad combination there, right? 7 colors, rather, combination that you have on a Sunday plate as well, right? I've used that metaphor too much at this particular point, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. There is a relationship between Patrice Motsepe and the faith communities through the Motsepe Foundation. So sports, churches, checked. When it comes to big business, Mr. Motsepe is big business. He is them. They are him. He is more big business than Cyril Ramaphosa is big business. He's more big business than Cyril Ramaphosa was when he went to be vice president of the ANC in 2012, and big business backed him. Big business backed him in a big way. So he has 3 of the pillars. They backed Ramaphosa, that is. They gave him all of that money to win the conference. How much more will they back Motsepe? How much more if they back Cyril? Because Patrice is them. He even has a large mansion in Stellenbosch. I don't know if you knew that. He does have large mansion in Stellenbosch. He basically is a Stellenbosch mafia at this point, right? He wouldn't consider himself, but he's got property there. And he obviously bought that property to be able to go there and cultivate relationships and meet with people discreetly, the movers and shakers of Stellenbosch. So he has 3 pillars. 3 of the pillars. Remember, I said the pillars were soccer, church, business, and students. Doesn't have students. Arguably, the EFF has students more than anybody else. EFF has got the students. But maybe this is where Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi fits in. Because Ndlozi has good relationships with the students. Is he on the bench at Power FM waiting to be called up to bring the students to support the campaign? Think about it. Think about it. Ndlozi's been still doing tours, giving talks at universities. He's deliberately giving talks at university. He did one, I think, last week, and he did one earlier this year at Wits University. Look, we're doing scenario analysis here. We're trying to see what the future outcomes are going to be. We don't have a crystal ball, but if we look at the events, look at the reporting, look at how media is covering certain things, they're giving us clues. And I think it's showing that there's a viability for a Patrice campaign. ANC is polling low without Cyril Ramaphosa on the ticket, according to those local polling companies and think tanks that make up these numbers, right? And they're saying that the number without Mr. Ramaphosa is as low as 20%. Realistically, the ANC is facing a serious challenge from the outside with the MK party and the Jacob Zuma brand. They've been losing elections in KZN, the by-elections, indicating that the MK brand is not slowing down in that province. MK potentially could go over the 50% mark in terms of their support in KZN. They're not going away. There's an awareness. So if all of these things are clear and the leading candidates are not popular, the ones who are trying to position themselves for the future leadership of the ANC, you've got Fikile Mbalula, Panyaza Lesufi, Paul Mashatile, Ronald Lamula. He didn't do well at the last conference. All of these people didn't do well. That therefore means that there are real concerns within the godfathers of the ANC that, no, this thing is not going to work. We need to bring back our last billionaire, our last big B. We did big B number 1, Ramaphosa. Now we need to do big B number 2, Motsepe. Think about it, because a factional fight at conference may lead to serious reputational damage for the ANC. And that could be the end of the ANC. It may even lead to another breakaway party, which is something that they don't want to have to deal with at this particular point. Just imagine going into 2028 and there's bad blood between various factions of the ANC. That's disaster for 2029. That would be total loss for the ANC. They will lose their control of South Africa, and we will be in the first time in history where the ANC is no longer in post-democratic history, where the ANC is no longer in power. And that will be a major development in African politics, because these dominant parties that have been running African states, they've really been problematic, but they've been able to hold on to power for very long periods of time. So the ANC understands that. The big donors who gave money to Mr. Ramaphosa, They did so because they believed that they were saving South Africa. They believed that they had somebody in Mr. Ramaphosa who was going to be able to fix corruption, deal with all of the problems. So they believed that they had a strong relationship with Mr. Ramaphosa, somebody who they had been doing business with for over a decade, someone who was part of the billionaire class in South Africa. They ultimately believed that he was someone who would be able to manage the radical aspirations of those in the ANC who are committed to the Freedom Charter and want to see it realized, and he would be able to protect their interests. That's why they gave him all of that money to win the conference and defeat Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, because we know that money plays a factor in the ANC. I played you that video. I don't know if I should play it again. Let me play it again so that you see what the role of money.
What it is that you think. Well, there is
what Pulemabe is saying. I think normally is the other differences. Then you are maybe entering the door of state power, municipal, same places.
Make their way into the venue. Buying of ANC members, some 90% of those have already been processed and they're registered. They'll make their way into the venue. But you mentioned something, especially in terms of access to resources. Mzwandile Masina, speaking to Clement Manyathela a few moments ago, alluded to the buying of ANC members. Is this something that you are hearing whispers about?
Yeah, I think the buying of the vote is common. In the last 4
make their way into the 1,500 voting delegates. Pulemabe indicating that some 90% of those have already been processed and they're registered. They'll make their way into the venue. But you mentioned something, especially in terms of access to resources. Mzwandile Masina, speaking to Clement Manyathela a few moments ago, alluded to the buying of ANC members. Is this something that you are hearing whispers about?
Yeah, I think the buying of the vote is common. In the last 4 conferences of ANC, the buying of the vote has been common, has been done at different, all these conferences in different ways. You know, in the past, they used to bribe delegates to say, when you vote, show us what you voted, who you voted for, and then they will give you the balance of the money that for bribery. And sometimes, so they change. Sometimes they want to see the photos of who you voted for. You must take the ballot and so on. So, and they give all sorts of monies for delegates because of the electoral law inside the ANC. As we are saying, we need to change how we elect leaders inside the ANC. We need ANC general elections in the future where all ANC members will have the right to nominate leaders and will also have the right to elect leaders. At the moment, it's only 2% of ANC members that are there in that Nazareth place. That 4,000 you're talking about is 2% of ANC members. 98% of ANC members are not there, including myself, of course. I'm not there, but somebody is going to vote on my behalf. So one delegate has power to vote for 50 people. And this is why when you buy that delegate, you actually buy 50 votes. And this is why we need to change the system once and for all.
How should we understand your absence in light of what you just said, that somebody could pretend to be you?
No, not really. In this case, somebody is not going to pretend to be me, but somebody is going to vote for me. Somebody
for
will
an example.
represent my branch, a delegate from my branch, who will then, because one delegate represents 50 members. So that person will be voting for the 49 other people who are not there. So as to what these 49 people are going to vote for, nobody can know. And this is why they bribe this one delegate, so that all the 50 votes are then going to a particular person who has paid the money. And that's why they're buying the vote. And it will be there until we change how we elect leaders inside the ANC.
Tata Mogwale, what's the going rate for a vote? How much does a vote go for? It fetches for how much typically?
It depends. It depends. They are not the same. If you have to bribe somebody in the urban areas of, Johannesburg, Gauteng, Durban City, Durban area, you might need to fork out more or promise them tenders of a railway line or pipeline that their company will get this tender and so on and so on. And for those who come from the villages in the past, you need to give them 20,000 others or 50,000. And when you come from a rural village, somewhere in the I don't want to mention the provinces, but many of these rural areas, provinces, if you come from there and they give you 50,000, they say you vote for so and so. When you go back to your village, you're really wealthy because you can buy maybe 10 goats and even have change. And in the village, then they'll know that this man comes from the ANC conference. So it depends. The value, I think, varies and changes, but they buy them. It's not known, And unfortunately, that's where some people make money out of ANC conferences.
Sure. You speak of
So Patrice can get the money. He's Mr. Big Money. You need to understand, the markets and investors want continuity and stability. They want another version of the GNU. They want a market-friendly ANC, and they want that leadership to work with the opposition groups like the Democratic Alliance. This makes Patrice attractive to them. The markets and the donors have fears about the independence and mandate of the Reserve Bank. They want the Reserve Bank to remain independent. They have concerns about the far-left ideas like expropriation without compensation, national health insurance. These things have been passed into law now, and those particular laws make the markets nervous. They make donors nervous. And remember, people with money, they do long-term planning. The trip to Lusaka to meet ANC leaders was in 1985. It was in 1985. Before that trip, they were circulating documents in Anglo around scenario planning and motivating for there to be a transition, as opposed to other versions where the military maybe could take over, etc., and prolong apartheid. There was scenario planning in the 80s, from early in the 80s. So don't think that this is too early. 2025 is too early. The conference is in 2027. The billionaires have been planning. It may very well be that these plans have been cooking for much longer than even now, and that they're just being rolled out now. And we are beginning to see the wave, beginning to see the motion, so to speak. Right? So that's something that we have to be aware of. The markets have bigger fears of the EFF and the MK party rising to power in South Africa, either with some version of a coalition with the ANC or by themselves. They fear the ideas of Julius Malema and others, and they fear the retribution of Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma was good to business. They got what they wanted. They really did. But they fear his retribution because they gave money to Patrice. Not Patrice, they gave money to Cyril Ramaphosa. Defeated Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, called him and his years 9 wasted years. They fear his retribution because he was in a cell for months. Right? So they are afraid of the return of Zuma in any capacity. They don't want Dudu Zuma anywhere close to power. You know that. I know that. It's not a secret. The markets and the investors want further privatization of state-owned enterprises. They want IPPs in private hands. They want water in private hands. They want a lot of the state apparatus actually run by the private sector, which that's them. They're the private sector. They want themselves to be running more. That's called an extractive economy, by the way. Patrice Motsepe is one of the people who has benefited extremely from the IPP deals. He's benefited extremely from BEE legislation. He's someone who's benefited extremely from a lot of the privatization. Therefore, as a result of his involvement in IPP, the World Economic Forum is down with him. As a result of his being pro-privatization, pro-big business, he is big business. So big business is with him. But then there's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Another billionaire president. Did that work the first time? When Ramaphosa came into power, it was meant to be the new dawn. Yuma Segala's song was appropriated. It was Tumamina that became the most popular song in Sandton, in the offices of South Africa during the Ramaphosa honeymoon. They said that state capture was over. The cartoonist Zapiro even drew cartoons of President Ramaphosa as the Black Panther. The vibranium was meant to be running in his blood. He was meant to be defeating the great gorilla Mbaku of radical economic transformation. Did you see the cartoon? But the economic data is not positive. The economic data is quite troubling. Just look at the economic data. In 2018, unemployment was at 27.1% in quarter 4 of 2018. But in 2025, in quarter 1 of 2025, it's at 32.9%. The numbers show that long-term unemployment is getting worse. In 2018, there were 4.3 million South Africans in long-term unemployment. In 2025, there are 6.2 million in long-term unemployment. Unemployment on the expanded definition is at 43%. Youth unemployment is at 60% for those between the ages of 15 to 34. Graduate unemployment has increased worryingly under the Ramaphosa administration. In quarter 4 of 2018, graduate unemployment was at 6.7%. Quarter 1 of 2025, it's at 11.7%. That's a decline of 75% alone in graduate employment in the Ramaphosa years. So things are not better. The man on the street has not been a winner with the billionaire because the cost of living is higher. Cost of electricity is choking households at this point. The dollar is much weaker than it was during the Zuma years. How many of these problems intersect with Patrice Motsepe? In 2009, Patrice Motsepe did an interview about the value of the rand, about IPPs. How many of those problems intersect with him directly? This is what he said.
I have no doubt that long term, the country, our currency, in fact, will have to considerably reduce in value in comparison with where it is now. I don't think a strong currency, long term, is in the best interest of our country. But whatever the exchange rate will be, with respect, I think it's something that must be determined by the market. We have, for many years, had a cost of electricity that was recognized at by global terms. We have been very competitive. Over the years, there's been some discussions about introducing competitors to Eskom. And in many parts of the world, you do have these independent power producers. I don't know at this stage as to how competitive. And in fact, the information I received in the past was that because Eskom was so cheap, it was unattractive for independent power producers to enter into the market. But we have to look at the cost of electricity and mitigate those expenses as best we can, and we will do that.
This kind of power and influence may actually be too much power for one man and for a few families. The book, Why Nations Fail, discusses how extractive economies do not take the steps required to expand access to economic opportunities for all their citizens. The elites don't have a motive to do that. The business elites, the oligarchs, the political elites. A billionaire who is both an owner of large chunks of the economy and also the leader of a country could wind up being the worst of all worlds, being someone who further extracts wealth for just those in his circle. Economic winners will not mind those in the suburbs, those who are in his political elite connections, those in the party. They won't mind. But it doesn't mean that those benefits will trickle down. The question in the back of my mind that I want to put to you to think about: while Sundowns has in some ways improved soccer, in other ways it has made the Premier Soccer League worse. That's because the league is not competitive. Yes, there was a lot of attention in the Nedbank Cup final and the other cup final. And it's almost as if Kaizer Chiefs fans were trying to compensate for their poor season, the way that they were overjoyed. Hey, if you're a Kaizer Chiefs fan, I'm not attacking you. I'm just pointing out that the thirst for some success somewhere, was being shown. Even Pirates say, at least we can win this thing. At least we can win over here. That's not necessarily a competitive PSL. How many teams are on the PSL? If only 3, and 1 especially is composing the national team, winning the league every year. It's the Msandawana League at this particular point. Is that necessarily better for soccer? Is it? Some people think so, because they look at the AFCON and they look at the performance of South Africa at that level and they say, well, it's worth it for that. But what about weekly watching of the Premier Soccer League. What about that? So what I'm trying to put across is that sometimes somebody winning everything is not always good for everyone. It's food for thought. What do you think? Do you think a Motsepe presidency would stop corruption, make South Africa win economically and socially? Was Ramaphosa the wrong billionaire? Is Patrice the right billionaire? Or do we need less billionaires in politics altogether? Let's have a conversation. I want to meet you in the comments.